Good afternoon. My name is Fatima, co-founder of Collective 365, and I am excited to welcome you all to our first official Lunch and Learn on the topic of the importance of investing in community organizers. I have my sidekick, my 2-year-old, who will be jumping in randomly to say things that don't connect to this topic. But just bear with us in this virtual space. I want to give a disclaimer that this session is being recorded, so please do what you need to do to take care of your virtual or electronic privacy, whether that's muting your video, your sound, changing your name. Please adjust yourself accordingly without judgment from us. So today I want to welcome Nikki, Brooke, and Chloe. Nikki uses she pronouns, Chloe uses she pronouns, and Brooke uses they pronouns. And I ask that we all honor their pronouns throughout this conversation. So welcome. I don't want to spend too much time on like bios, so I'm going to let you all share. I was going to read your bios, but I think it's better when people say it. So putting you on the spot, first question is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your work? Like, do you even identify as a community organizer? I know I'm kind of putting that label on you all because that's how I see you all in the community, but I'd be interested to know.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe Edwards, her pronouns. I hate doing introductions, but I'll just say I am the president of the Black Lives Matter 804 organization. We just became a 501c3, so yay. Also the founder of Racial Truth and Reconciliation Virginia, which is in affiliation with Voices for Virginia's Children, empowering marginalized communities and acknowledgement of truth to promote healing, reconciliation, and justice. I serve on a few boards or committees, Virginia PTA DEI, I'm Just Me Movement, which is a mentoring organization, and then on the advisory board of Performing Statistics, so combating youth prisons. But today I'll be representing Black Lives Matter 804, which is under Chloe Edwards Incorporated. So you can find all of my information at chloeedwards.com, chloeiedwards.com. Do I identify as a community organizer? I'd say I don't really dip into the labels too much, but in the past I've usually used the word advocacy and activism sometimes, and organizing sometimes interchangeably.
I guess I'll go. Hi, my name is Nikki Duncan-Talley. I, of course, use she, her pronouns, and I actually am a regional field director for New Virginia Majority. I also sit on the paralegal board for Todd Ward Community College, as well as doing a lot of advocacy work with sexual and domestic violence. And I would say I partially identify with being a community organizer, but only in as much as I think, like Chloe said, the label, I don't necessarily give into any labels, but the if that's what I do in the community. I do organizing and do a lot of advocacy around not only domestic and sexual violence, but also around building political power and communities of color. So that's me.
Thanks, Fatima, for organizing this. And thank you to everyone who's shown up and who's on the way to show up. And to my fellow panelists. I would start off by saying I agree definitely with what Chloe and Nikki said around, like, for me, labels aren't always as helpful. but I think that it's very important that the organizing happens within the community. And oftentimes, I think when you put a label on it, it turns into something that people think is very formalized. And for me, community organizing oftentimes happens in informal ways. So talking one-on-one with people, having, what seems like random conversations just to get to know each other and really figure it out, like where our passions lie and how we can work together for the benefit of the community. And for me, when I say community, I'm specifically talking about Black queer people, the greater Black community as a whole, but particularly QTPOC folks. And so I wanted to specify that. A little bit about my background. I'm Brooke, I use they, them. Currently, I'm a co-director of the Collab Spot, which thank you, Fatima, for putting the link in the chat, is a new Black-focused co-working space and community center. We made the decision to open up during the pandemic, and so we're still getting our sea legs under us. But we envision the space to be one that all Black people can come and feel safe and feel like they are being catered to in this city, where we are being pushed out more and more every day. So that's the hat I'm wearing here. I also work in the sexual and domestic violence field, and definitely consider myself an advocate for all marginalized people. I also have a consulting firm, Catalyst for Change Consulting. Again, thanks Fatima for putting the link in the chat. And I work with VCU in a few different capacities in the education field. So thank you for letting us introduce ourselves.
No problem. Thank you. I know I put you on the spot because I said I was going to read bios, but then I was like, when I was doing it, I was like, I might take something out that may be really important to you. And so I was like, let me let you be in control of your narrative. So a lot of you mentioned that you may not identify as a community organizer per se, but what makes you do what you do? Like, what is your motivating factor, and like the why, kind of like what got you into doing what you're doing? How did you determine your passions? Because I'm sure that there are people who are listening who may be trying to figure out if this is the space for them.
I guess I'll go first. One of the things that I'll say is that definitely me having children was one of the things that kind of re-sparked my interest in advocacy, because I knew that the world I was living in was not what I want my children to be living in the next 10 years. And if I'm not going to help be part of the change, then I'm part of the problem. So that was one of the reasons why I've gotten involved in the myriad of things that I've been involved in. But from a little girl, my mom was a union president in DC, and so she took me to things like the March for housing security in DC and things of that nature. So it's kind of always been there. And even in the work I did, I really kind of, I don't want to say I just fell into it, but at the time I worked for colleges and universities, and even while working with colleges and universities, a lot of my job had to do with organizing and helping the students to organize around the things that they felt were important. So that's how I kind of got involved in organizing and advocacy.
I can hop in. We're popcorn, and it's tough over Zoom where you can't, but yeah. I would say that, like Nikki, I feel like I grew up in it. I come from a Black church family. My grandfather is a pastor, and there's nothing about Black church that doesn't have to do with organizing, and usually for the good. And so I grew up with parents that were educators and taught me the importance of knowing who I was and where I came from. And so I think that it was always there. As I went to college, undergrad and grad school, being queer, being who I am, who I present as in the world, there were always opportunities for advocacy. And I've always felt like, even if I didn't have the experience that I should have had in an institution, other people behind me should have a better experience than I did. And so that is what drives a lot of my advocacy, is realizing what is wrong with the world, and also realizing that, we can be the ones to push for change, however slow and incremental that change might be. So I definitely have seen a lot of different unjust situations. I have a deep passion for criminal justice advocacy and reform. And so I think, I've been in a lot of different situations that caused me to want to advocate for people to see things be different. Currently, with the Collab Spot, the partnership, we saw a need in Richmond. We saw that there wasn't really any Black queer space that was dedicated just to Black and queer people. There's queer spaces in Richmond, and there's Black spaces in Richmond, and we just didn't see one that combined the two in a safe, fun environment where people could just be who they are. And so we took action, and sometimes advocacy is action based, and so that's what led us to the creation of the Collab Spot.
Thanks. I'll go next. I often think it's our experiences, our personal experiences, that guide us to change work, which is ultimately hard work. So I have similar experiences to my colleagues here. My Aunt Rhonda introduced me to the concept of actually celebrating Black History Month when I was in middle school. I can't say I celebrated Black History Month with my family growing up. That just was not a normal thing for us. My aunt's a little more liberal, and her mom, my Aunt Gwendy, was a freedom writer. So my aunt was heavily into culture. So when she moved here to Richmond, we toured the Black History Museum. We went to Maggie Walker's house, and that was really an eye opener for me, because those were things that, the schools don't teach. But when it comes to purpose, I often say it's our passion or pain or opportunity that drives us. And for me, it's definitely pain. It's my upbringing, the inequities that I witnessed. We were poor, living in a middle-class neighborhood. My mom wanted us to go to the good schools. She grew up in the projects and did not want the same life for us. My father struggled with substance abuse and incarceration. So, and then I went to college and experienced racism at a PWI for the first time, and all the Black students clung on to each other for dear life, and we clung on to the professors of color for dear life too, because those were the only people looking out for us. So then I got involved in the demonstrations and the activism, and so that's what ultimately led to my passion for advocacy and activism. We knew that we wouldn't see the change in the moment as swastikas was getting drawn around campus. We were getting told to go home back to Africa. But we wanted to ignite change for the other students that would follow our footsteps.
Awesome. Not the experiences you had, but awesome that you were able to, I love what you said, Chloe, of either pain or passion or opportunity, right? And I heard that through all of your answers. One thing that came up for me was, so I struggle with this idea of for us, by us. I love that concept. And I'm also like, yo, I didn't create this system. And now I'm working so hard to undo your mess, kind of. And I kind of want you to like fix your crap. So my next question is, how do you balance advocating for the community, excuse me, communities that you belong to? So whether that is queer, women, Black, whatever, like how do you find that balance when the work is you and you are the work?
I guess I can go first this time. We're sort of trading off. Um, so for me, I believe that For Us Bias is critical. I'm a product of HBCUs, 3 different HBCUs, and I think they were instrumental into crafting, helping to craft me into who I am today. I believe in Black only spaces. I believe in Black only business, well, not Black only, but Black focused businesses and POC focused businesses. That doesn't mean that it all falls on us, right? And so I think that when we talk about allyship, we have to be very clear as to what we mean. And so for the collab spot, what we mean by allyship is, what are your actions, right? Like you can't just say I support Black queer people. How does that line up with your pockets, right? And so in Richmond, we have a very robust business scene prior to COVID and even now. We have one of the top areas for restaurants that folks want to come see. A ton of people are moving here. We have a great nonprofit sector here, right? And so all of these white people that have access to money, how are you supporting the Black and brown people that you say you are supporting? It's more than just hashtags. How are you setting Black people in your community up for success? Let's talk about real ways, right? Let's talk about property. Let's talk about the money. Let's talk about the things people want to shy away from, right? And so for me, allyship is an action word. What we expect from white organizations that ally or call themselves allies with the collab spot is a stated financial commitment over the course of a year, as well as a stated more intangible commitment of support, right? So are you pushing the work that we're doing out to your social media channels? Are you coming out to the events, not just giving some money, right? Like, are you actually integrating yourself into the community in the ways that are appropriate for a white ally to do? So all that to say, I believe both are very important. For Us Bias and realizing that, reparations are real, right? Reparations are due. And so in the city of Richmond, what does that look like from our white allies? And if they don't want to have that conversation, they're not allies, period. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Brooke.
I guess I'll go next. So, I mean, I have 2 perspectives when it comes to this question. Well, one, I don't think it's the person's impacted, the people impacted by oppression's responsibility to be the cure to oppression. But I do think that us informing and serving in a leadership role is important, because slavery was in the name of helping Black and brown folks. And we see that that wasn't the most helpful thing at all. It's what's brought us to this predicament. So there's many things that can go wrong when Black and brown people aren't playing a leadership in an empowered role and identifying the solutions to the challenges that they face. I don't think it's the best practice for organizations to come in with their solutions without talking to a Black or brown person, period. At that same time, we often are put in a position where we have to be the solution to what impacts our everyday experiences. And then there's a lot of pushback and challenges and threats, et cetera, that we get in the process of doing that. So I've had to be real with myself when it comes to what I can and cannot take on. And I can't say I've done a great job of doing that, but it's certainly a journey. I think this work can be traumatic. It can, people face secondary trauma, compassion fatigue. So you can't be a good advocate if you aren't taking care of yourself first. I personally have sought a Black counselor, a Black woman specifically. I wanted someone that could resonate with my experiences when it came to racism and oppression, and I wanted someone that could speak my language and connect with my culture. I've also learned how to say no to things, especially when people ask me to teach them how to be an ally or teach them the right way to go about activism. It's not our job unless I'm paid for it. So it's small steps like that that I've taken to really navigate being a member of the community and being so connected to the work, but also at the same time ensuring that I still exist outside of the work.
Snaps and claps to pay me for my knowledge.
Yes. Okay, so one of the reasons why I went last is because I really even knowing what this question is, have been thinking about it for a long time, because I think at times I do not have a good balance on being a member of the community and advocating for the community. And I think that just comes with, because understanding that I am a part of the community that I am serving, and that what I am striving for will not only benefit me, but will benefit my community. My balance is not always great. But one of the things that I've definitely looked at, especially in the past year, is, excuse my language, Fatima knows this, but I'm a cursor. So if you guys are disturbed by that, I apologize. But
bring your authentic self.
You know, I always do, Fatima. Sometimes that's probably the issue. But one of the things that I do kind of to keep myself grounded is when I show up in spaces, I definitely show up as my full self. I don't give a fuck who cares or who likes it. I don't know how to be anybody other than myself. And I have, within the past year, said, fuck allyship. If you're just going to be an ally, then I don't need you in my life. I need co-conspirators. I need people that are going to be in the fight with me, not standing on the sidelines being my cheerleader. And I think we do need spaces. It's one thing when you talk about segregation, but it's another thing when you're talking about being separate. Separate is a choice. And having Black and brown businesses, historically, Black and brown communities have done much better when we've had our own businesses, had our own things like banking in our communities. But historically, it has always been destroyed by white lash. The fallacy of scarcity, that if we start to get ahead, then that means that you have to be behind when there's enough to go around for everybody. And so that is where I am with balance. And For Us by Us is definitely something that it seems like we've always as a community strove for. And when we reach those, when we reach the precipice of having those things, it is always, and it's not incrementally destroyed, but it's always a drastic something that happens, like the burning down of Black Wall Street, which a lot of people don't even know ever existed. So yeah, that's where I am in balance.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add in, I'm sorry, Fatima.
No, I was just saying thank you, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the more internal piece of that question around self-care, or how do you balance? For me, I think it's really important to have people that you trust. This work is messy. People always like to gloss over the messiness of community organizing. And you can't trust everybody. That's just the truth. All skin folk ain't kin folk. Everybody's not on the same mission as you. Everybody doesn't have the same passion as you, and everybody doesn't have the same work ethic as you, for good or for bad, right? And everybody is not your people, period. And so for me, having my people, having people that I know, if I'm venting, it's not gonna show up on Facebook the next day. If I'm trying to, work through something tough, it's not gonna end up, on the front page of RTD, right? You really do need folks around you that can form, a protective hedge. And of course, for me, a part of that is spirituality. I don't think that has to be a part of everybody's life, but knowing that this work is divine, in my opinion. This is a divine work. The stories of injustice have gone on since the beginning of time and will continue until the end of time. And so this is divine work that we're doing. And so having a divine connection is important to me as well.
Thank you. So when we talk about we just talked about balance externally and from an internal perspective as well. And I couldn't help but think about the idea that it's kind of trendy and cute to be like, oh, I'm protesting, oh, Black Lives Matter, oh, buy Black. And so we're seeing this power. And when Nikki's talking about having our own businesses, banking, we see the power, the potential of even more, right? But we often don't see a paycheck with that power. So it's like, Chloe, I love seeing you in the streets. Brooke, thanks for, resurrecting a building for me. And that's kind of like the extent of it. And people aren't recognizing when all of those folks were in the streets day in and day out, the streets did not cut them a paycheck. There was not a direct deposit for doing their work. And so are you able to speak to the struggles on the side of financial, and you've Chloe hit on it a little bit as far as the fatigue, the compassion fatigue and things like that. But if you could let folks know kind of, and this is the heart of our conversation of why investing and investing, to Brooke's point, doesn't always mean money, because I know everybody don't have a checkbook to write money, but what else does that look like as far as kind of meeting the needs and responding to the struggles?
Yes, I'll go
Oh,
first.
and before you answer, I just want to say feel free to shamelessly plug ways that people can contribute to you specifically too. So I want macro, how can people respond? And then you personally, or the things that you're connected to.
Right. So one of the things that my grandmother always taught me is that you need to find something that you love and find somebody or a way to get paid to do that. And that's one of the things I've done by joining New Virginia Majority, because it is a organization that does center people of color in everything that they do. But one of the things that I do understand is that sometimes, like you said, a paycheck doesn't come from your organizing. I just have been blessed enough to find a space where I fit, and the mission that they have is the same mission that I have. how do you, this country, the power is always seemed to be in the money, no matter like what you're talking about, whether it's politically, with education, everything. I think Fatima and I have talked about this before, but there are times where, unfortunately, you have to be willing to sacrifice something in order to gain something else. And there have been plenty of times where I've worked at jobs and have figured out that that organization was not for me. And even though I have 2 kids, a house, mortgage, all those things, I was ready to move because I knew that that just wasn't the place for me. And I know that everybody is not in a position or a place where they're able to make those kind of decisions. If it comes to, I'm going to advocate for this, or I'm going to get a paycheck to feed my family, the paycheck to feed the family is usually the bottom line. And so I was going to say, and I think one of the things that community organizers struggle with is sometimes the apathy of the community that they're working to support, and that they're working to uplift. When you go and you knock on a door and the only thing you're trying to do is make sure that the people know that there's a upcoming governor's election, and they won't even answer the ring doorbell. It's kind of off-putting, but you know that what you are doing is can make a drastic impact on the state of not only your community, but the water community within the state at large. And I think that I am actually probably still trying to figure out really how to harness the paycheck power. And I definitely give kudos to people like Brooke and Chloe who have started their own organizations to create a paycheck for themselves and others as well that are doing this work. So I don't know, there's a lot of struggle with community organizing. And some of it has to do really with, because I'm trying to really think. That's all I got for right now. If I think of something else, I'll jump in, but that's all I got. Because it's a struggle when you are talking about liberation versus a paycheck to do the day-to-day. Liberation is necessary, but the day-to-day, you have to make it day-to-day in order to get to the liberation. So, hard question.
Yeah. And of course, I'm by no means saying that there's kind of like a one word or even 1-2 sentence answer, but just trying to give perspective to the work that's being.
Go next. It's a really, really hard space to navigate. Like, I resonated with a lot of with what you said, Nikki, because when you're working for an institution, like whether it's nonprofit or whatever, there's this thing called the nonprofit industrial complex, and ultimately, when you think of who funds. When you think of the evolution of nonprofits, that was in response to slavery. And now we're going to start talking about the white savior industrial complex. But white women came and they founded these nonprofits to help the slaves that had just gotten emancipated. Obviously, the slaves, newly freed slaves, still needed help. And so this whole complex was founded through, white saviorism. And then these funders, often white old men, are funding these institutions, and you have to follow the framework of the system of racism in order to receive this funding. So on one hand, it's like, yeah, nonprofits are making a difference, but it's just within this framework that really perpetuates and maintains the systems of oppression instead of combating the systems of oppression, going through community-led models like activism, like organizing, where individuals are really coming up with their own solutions to change these systems. But ultimately, if we deconstruct these systems, we're deconstructing the nonprofit sector. And so a lot of people have not quite gotten there yet when it comes to the sector. A lot of organizations are going through their own reckoning processes. So it's really difficult because, yeah, you need a paycheck to pay your bills, put food on the table, and I'm there and we've all been there. But at the same time, there's times where I think to myself, and it's like, why don't I just invest in my own self and my own business? Because there's a lot of moves that before I make it, I gotta say, and this is me representing Chloe and no other organization, but I gotta say, like, am I gonna lose my job if I do this? And so it's a constant navigation of these really complex systems. And even when you do find you found your own organization, you still gotta work full time to pay your bills because it's, it's a startup, et cetera. And ultimately you're not doing it for the money. And then, you're investing so much in that sector that you don't have the time to invest in your side gig or your activism work to really get it up and going, apply for grants, et cetera, capacity build. So, I mean, there's a fine balance that you constantly have to think about. There's the lack of financial resources. I've seen organizers dig into their own pockets to help someone that they've been working with, or to, I've dug into my own pocket for Black Lives Matter to build our website, et cetera. And then at the same time, you're challenging the status quo, you're challenging all of these racial normalities, racism that's normalized. And so you're gonna get pushback, you're gonna get threats on the news that they're arresting Black Lives Matter leaders. You're gonna, you may have to write an apology letter to a colleague or a supervisor, whatever. And so there's also that layer that comes to it, the risk of getting fired. So you're constantly having to compare and contrast the risk versus the award. And do I put food in the table, or do I really stand up for change? So it's just hard to really navigate.
Thank you, Chloe.
I think that a critical point of understanding for this whole question is that the system that we live in as people of color in America, particularly as Black people in America, we were never meant to survive this. Like, this is not set up for our survival. It's not set up for us to thrive. And so when we do those things, survive and thrive, we are bucking the system at every turn, right? And so that's critical to even understanding this as a whole. You're meant to struggle, and so the struggle is real, but it's also planned, right? Like, there's a reason why in Virginia you can count on both hands how many Black EDs there are of the nonprofits in the state of Virginia. We want to be real, right? And so there's a reason why, when people tout their diversity and inclusion statistics, all the Black and brown people are in junior positions. And when you ask to see the board, or you ask to see the decision makers, they're all white women. And so there's a reason for that, is what I'm saying. So if you're getting into this and you don't know, or do not believe that there will be struggle attached to it, don't get into it. There will be a struggle. I don't think you have to stay in a place of struggle. But as Chloe was saying, I want to be clear, when we started the collab spot, we knew that we would not make a profit for at least 1 year. It was never about making a profit. Literally, the business model is not set up so that we get these windfalls of cash. The business model is for the community. but it's a privilege to even be in the position to be able to do that. And so for me, I think that it's important to realize that, you have to pull together, you have to merge with other like-minded people, and you have to have a plan. And so we're seeing like a resurgence of old school methods of fundraising. I think I forget the term, people call it different things, but when you get a group of 10 people that you trust and everybody puts in $300 a month, and then one month it goes to Tina, and the next month it goes to,
it's a susu.
A susu, right? They're calling it a bunch of different things, right? But that's old school. That's what, our ancestors did, right? And so we're getting back to some of those methods of taking care of each other. I also think when we talk about struggle and a paycheck, it's very important to be able to be financially stable. And the question is, what is your definition of success? Where are you trying to go? And there's no judgment from me on that. Are you trying to have a Rolls Royce and a gated mansion? If so, there's a different level of paycheck that you need for that, right? And again, do you, whatever you want is cool, but being clear about like how you define success, how you define financial stability, and how do you get there from that? So there's definitely a struggle. I'm blessed to have stable income. But don't nothing come for free out here, y'all. And so even if you're working a stable job, what are the sacrifices you're making for that? There's going to be sacrifices regardless of if you're working for yourself or working for somebody else. The question is, what type of sacrifices do you want to make? And just to touch on the MPIC, I definitely agree. I mean, I've worked in nonprofits basically my entire professional career, and I think that it's time to change some stuff. If we're being honest, we can push for change. We can demand that our organizations have a more equitable distribution of power. We can do those things, and it's up to us to have a line that says, we will not put up with this anymore, right? Personally, I believe that Virginia nonprofits need to start a unionizing process. That's my belief. I think that nonprofit workers need unions because some of the stuff that happens in these organizations is trash, if we're being completely honest. And so I'll stop there because like Chloe said,
you don't have to
the job sometimes.
Okay, because I was going to say you are welcome to go left, right, back, or forth. I'm here for it.
I will say that one thing that Black Lives Matter 804 did over the summer was we launched a campaign, Day Off for Solidarity, to invest in to provide stipends for the organizers worth the days off so that they could go and protest, because we recognize it's a sacrifice for individuals to raise their voices if they don't have paid leave, which is another initiative that many organizations are working on at the General Assembly. I've noticed other organizations, some nonprofits, including Voices for Virginia's Children, is providing stipends to advocates if they're participating in listening sessions, or we had advocacy cohorts this year and provided a stipend to compensate advocates for their time. So I do think that is a best practice that organizations could follow in order to ensure that there's equity when we're really saying that we value people's time and compensating them for it. And it also gives community members the opportunity to lead and be connected to decision-making tables or activism.
Thank you. So I want to just do a recap really quick. So you can do individual investments in people. Some of the things that I know for us at Collective 365, it was really important to us was being able to provide funding for a person who's doing the work. Like you don't, and I think hearing you all speak underscores why that's so important, because there are individuals who, you know, can't be tied to an organization because there might be backlash, fear of being fired, all of this red tape, and it's centered still in white supremacy. And so doing that work separately should be valued and compensated. And so there's that invest in the individual. Also, like pushing for your agencies or businesses to compensate for time off. So like a lot of jobs give you time off to like go to your kid's baseball game or do community service. Like it should be perceived as one and the same. Another way is showing up. So like writing the check is great, but also being in person. And if you can't be in person, like Brooke said, sharing that message on your platforms is really critical, and having the conversations. So I appreciate you all sharing kind of those tips on how to invest, but then also the real struggles that are presented to folks. Since it is 12:51, the other questions I feel like we've already spoken to, but the two that I really do want to ask are, what would you tell someone who wishes to engage in activism and advocacy? And then tell us what's next for you and or the organizations that you work with.
Can we take those one at a time, or did you want us to?
You can answer both or separately. I just wanted to like let the people that were listening know that we are going to open it up soon to Q&A, but those were just the last two questions. So there's no pressure to answer both, but just wanted to throw.
Gotcha. So I think this is something I meant to add on my last response, but in terms of for folks who are trying to get into organizing or who would like to get more involved, it is critical that you find a mentor. And a mentor is someone who cares about you, not caring more about furthering their own agenda. And so if you're not careful, you can get hooked up with people who, as soon as you divert from their plan for your life, then they are no longer in your corner. And so really taking time to get to know people, to seek out people who are doing things that you find cool or you're passionate about, right? To listen, be in rooms with folks, even if it's virtual rooms, and listen to the conversations that are happening. If you listen, you will learn so much about folks, and find somebody that's aligned with what your vision for the future is, and that cares about helping you get there. And so that's my number one piece of guidance for anyone. A mentor can really make or break you. We cannot do this on our own, but it's also important. Sometimes in the Black community, we are focused on, doing things in such a traditional way that mentorship almost looks like hazing. It's like, well, I'll only help you out if you do X, Y, Z, or, you need to sew into my business before I'll shout you. That's not mentorship, right? That's actually manipulative relationship. And so finding someone who cares about you and cares about your growth in this work is super important. And so that's where I would start for that. So I'll just leave it there.
And like following that kind of same vein, I definitely agree with Brooke. Having a mentor is definitely because a mentor can help be an accountability partner, because there's some times where we get off track from the goals that we are striving for. The other thing I would tell somebody who wishes to engage in advocacy or activism is to formulate a kitchen cabinet. Get people that that you are close with, that can be things like your truth teller, that will tell you that idea fucking sucks. Let's try to rework it. The person who will actually somebody who will hold you accountable and say, well, you said that by April 6th, you would have 90% of this done and only 30% is done. Because a lot of times I think that's what happens, is that we have these grand ideas and then the follow through is not there. And then there's nobody to kind of call you in to say, hey, remember, this is what we said we were going to be doing. And my other thing would be just do it. Like, if you see something and you want it to be changed, don't sit by and think that somebody else is gonna do it. Do it. Just try. Even if you're not sure where to start, reach out. I mean, the internet, it's right at your fingertips. But depending on like what area of Virginia or what area of DC or Maryland, you know, that you're in, there's probably somebody doing the work that you want to do. Reach out to those folks. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel in order to engage. So that's what I'll say for that.
Thank you, Nikki. I also want to add one quick point about don't wait for somebody else or think that somebody else might do it, but also don't think that you can't, like that you aren't qualified. I think so many times outside the Black community and in the Black community, we are told like, you don't have this qualification, whether it's formal or informal. And so I just wanted to add that little point of like, you are worthy, you're needed, and you bring experience and expertise to the table.
Thanks, that's totally valid. And your lived experience is your expertise. That's what makes you an expert in what you're doing. I have similar thoughts. I would just share, you know, assessing whether the work is for you. I've seen people get into the work and to no judgment, it's just not for them, or they're not emotionally ready to tell their story, to live through and advocate on behalf of their experiences. I've seen folks really struggle mentally, be in a mental health crisis as a result of how taxing this work is. And this work is taxing, and it can be traumatizing. So I would say just make sure you're ready and don't feel like you have to do it because there's people marching and saying Black Lives Matter. Don't feel like you have to join. There's other ways to do the work without having to engage in activism or organizing. So that's basically what I'd say. There's also power in numbers. So I do notice a lot in the field. One, it's hard to get to know other organizers because there's, you know, that building of trust first, and you have to earn the relationship. But two, many do not have funding to invest in platforms. So you may not know that they exist. So I would definitely analyze the map and see what exists already and where you can plug in, so that we're not reinventing the wheel and we're working with each other towards a collective good. And then lastly, just, you know, check yourself when it comes to taking care of you, whether it's counseling. I personally got an emotional support animal this year too, whether it's whatever drives you, connecting with family, friends, etc. Just check yourself, because mental health is maintenance, just like a doctor's appointment. So as far as what's coming up, I do have 2 events coming up that you all can plug into. April 15th is the Racial Truth and Reconciliation Virginia Coalition meeting. So we'll be doing some post-General Assembly session updates and have invited partners to also provide updates from different organizations. And then April 16th, Virginia is the first state in the South to declare racism as a public health crisis. So we'll have a webinar featuring Delegate Ayer, the legislator behind that, as far as where do we go from here. So that's what's next for us.
Thank you, Chloe.
And just to piggyback on what Chloe said, I think the like therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, somebody that is not somebody who's technically a like objective third party to talk to when you're in this kind of field is almost a must. Whether, and it could be a shaman, you know, a pastor, a priest, but having somebody to talk to who is not a family member or a colleague is very beneficial.
Yeah, so just some things that are coming up. The Collab Spot, we have our virtual series that is usually on Wednesdays. I'm going to put the website in the chat again. Feel free to go to the website. It'll show you all of our different social media accounts and things like that. Following us, you'll be in the know of when events are going to happen. You know, as the weather turns warmer, we're excited to get to work on our community garden that is going to benefit the North Side community. Folks of color can come over and get whatever type of vegetables we're growing for free. We also intend to have more social events as COVID restrictions ease up. We are very, we believe in safety. So, you know, we're not going to do things that are unsafe, but we also believe in connection. And I know that the connection of the Black and Brown community has suffered over the last year. And so, you know, we're excited to just get to knowing people again, to have a block party, to have a barbecue, to be around each other, because that's what sustains this work. You know, we have to have Black joy. We have to have that joy in there too. So yeah, just be on the lookout for those things. So yeah.
Yes, thank you. I loved that you ended with the whole Black joy, because I think sometimes we, to your point earlier, can get so consumed by what we're consuming. You know, we're consuming a lot of Black death, white supremacy, etc., and then it's not uplifted. The Black joy is not uplifted and centered in the same way. So it can seem like there's an imbalance. So thank you for reminding us of that. So now I want to say thank you to our panelists. This is not over quite yet. I want to open the floor up to those of you who are listening. If anybody wants to ask any questions, or if you have any words of wisdom that you want to share, please feel free to do that. And you can unmute yourself or type in the chat.
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming in today, virtually, of course. And Brooke, what you said about like most of the EDs being white really resonated with me, because I have also started to notice how that pretty much impedes on the movement that we're trying to do, the work that we're trying to do. There's these roadblocks that seem to be invisible, but we see them. But I just want to let you know that that resonated with me. I know and understand what you're saying, and I feel it. And it reminds me of this study that was done on facing race, you know, about how there's so much racism in nonprofits. And I hope that's a conversation that continues to go on, because it's something that has really sparked my interest, and mostly because it's something I've been affected by since working in the nonprofit sector. So again, thank you guys for showing up. And Nikki, it's always nice to see you. I'm working the hotline, so I'm like doing double duty, which is why you can't see me. So still nice to see you guys.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, and I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your experience and again, underscoring the reason why we need to keep having these conversations.
I'm a baby activist, so I'm learning a lot from you guys. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And I want to read Devin in the chat said, thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom and your experiences. Such a blessing to hear from folks doing the work. Indeed, it is. Any other questions, thoughts? And that's also to the panel if they want to throw anything out there.
I had a question. First, I want to also thank everybody for being here. I really appreciate this space. I'm really curious to hear from people as far as, you know, there's the creation of your own spaces or the creation of spaces for others and community, but also having to, as you were saying earlier, you know, still have jobs and navigate different spaces. And so I'm kind of curious about the navigation around the masks any of you all wear in certain spaces. I think for me, in this past year, my mask is eroding by the day. And so, which I am thankful for in a lot of respects, but it's also a hard thing to figure out how to live with that reality now and moving forward. The whole narrative around going back to normal is something that I, in no way, shape, or form, plan to, you know, do myself. So I'm curious how you all how do you know when it's appropriate to wear your mask, to what degree, when is it, you know, bring benefit to the community in some way? Because I think for me, I try to be aware of the privileges that I have so I can get in spaces that others would not have the chance to be in, which does require a mask at times. So just kind of curious around that.
Okay, so Brooke is laughing, and Fatima looks like she has a little giggle too. They know me, well, they've known me for a little bit now, and I refuse to wear a mask. I just refuse to do it. And I will say that being a Black woman, how do I say this? I've been afforded some privileges within my life where I have never felt like I needed to wear a mask or needed to pretend to be anybody other than who I am. But I do understand feeling like you should be putting on a performance in order to kind of fit in. In my household, my mom has always instilled in me, and I've always instilled in my children, that who you are is fine, no matter how weird, different, whatever. You are enough. And to wear a mask and not be who you are is a detriment to yourself. It doesn't hurt anybody but you. And I think that my mom is the person who's given me that, just that energy that I refuse to be anybody, and I'll say whatever I need to say or what I feel needs to be said regardless. But the only thing is that in doing those things, I do realize that there can be consequences. And there can be backlash from you being who you are. And one of the things that I have come to the conclusion of in my life is that I'm willing to make the sacrifice, because I don't ever want either of my children to have to feel like they have to pretend to be somebody that they're not in order to be accepted or fit in or loved or belong. So when you asked that, I was like chomping at the bit to answer you, because I just like, and I will say, for part of my life, I grew up in Southeast DC, where like legit, I really didn't even realize like white people existed outside of the television and down at the National Mall. Like I didn't know that they were like a thing. Like that was not in my community. It was all Black and brown people. It was nobody that didn't in some way like fit into that mold until we moved to Virginia Beach. And this has been a very like mixed world that I've lived in. And I didn't move down here until I was in the 8th grade. But even being here in a town where it's mostly military, it's also allowed me to experience things that I wouldn't have necessarily experienced. But I was always that kid, and I think Fatima and Brooke may know, and even Brittany, that I was the kid that if they said Black people didn't do it, I did it. I ski, I bungee jump, I cliff dive, like if you name it, yes, Southeast Brittany. But like I do all those things. I also go to the opera and eat like charcuterie trays and drink wine. So just knowing that you don't have to fit into any box that somebody has made for you to fit in. It's much more fun living outside the box, trust me.
First of all, I don't want to put a race attached to good cheese and wine. Like
I was just thinking the same thing.
I'm just telling you what people tell me. They're like, you do what?
That's fair. I'm just saying a good Merlot and Gouda, that does not have a race attached to it. Okay. So anyway, I'm sorry. I appreciate your answer and I appreciate the question. So I believe that I respect and appreciate Nikki's perspective. So for me, folks don't get 100% of me, period. And I don't care if we're talking about a white space, a Black space, a BIPOC space. People don't get 100% of me. That's reserved for the people that are closest to me. And that is a mechanism that I have in place for good reason. So that's number one. Number two, and I think this is combining what Brittany was talking about. Well, the thought she had, I thought after her question, you know, the thing about nonprofits is they like to have this, we're family. We're not. You're not my family. You pay my paycheck. And it is a cult. And as soon as I don't, or as soon as I stop providing the service that you're paying my paycheck for whatever reason, I will find out as soon as I stop doing that, how little you care about me. And so early in my career, I got caught up in that kind of stuff, right? It's like, oh, the organization. No, damn the organization. I'm gonna be real with you. And so for me, it's about a trade-off of what am I getting out of this and what are you getting? And being very honest about that. And when we stop looking at these organizations or these companies or these businesses as family, and we start looking at it for what it is, it becomes a lot easier to make your own boundaries, right? And in the queer community, it can be difficult. The queer community has notoriously bad boundaries. Like I'm just putting it out there. Shit is messy, but having boundaries and being a person of integrity is important to me. And so for me, Evan, there are things that I'm willing to compromise on, but there's things that absolutely I will never compromise on. So you're not going to talk to me any type of way, period. I don't care if you're signing my paycheck or not. You're not going to talk to me any type of way. You're not going to make me feel like I'm less than. When, you know, if we're being real, Black folks, Black AFAB folks oftentimes have double, triple, quadruple the level of formal education as these white EDs do out here, right? So you're not going to talk to me crazy. You know, talk to me nice, you know, so that's number one. But also there's a constant balancing for me around like, okay, so what am I getting out of this situation? What am I giving? If it's too unbalanced, then I have to find a different situation. And that's completely my autonomy to do so. Not feeling the guilt that these organizations want you to feel. There was an article that came out that people in my age range, we don't stay at jobs anymore over 3 years. And I was talking to members of my family about that, and they were like, oh my God, y'all are ruining your career. And I was like, no, we're not. I've gotten consistently paid 15 to 20% more every time I've switched a job. The only thing that they want you to think is that you're going to do worse if you leave. Because again, like Brittany says, it's a cult, but you won't. You'll do better because you have the experience and you're taking it to where you want to be. And so in terms of wearing a mask, I think that that's a trade-off. I think that it's really important to protect, I can speak for me, to protect the parts of myself that are vulnerable and that don't need to be exposed to people outside of my circle. And so I'll always do that, but I'm not going to wear a mask in terms of being who they want me to be. I'm not going to be a pushover. I'm not going to be someone who does everything you ask me to do just because you asked me to do it. And so, yeah, so if you're talking about identity, I've never been able to wear a mask. I've always been, gay. I've always been presented in the world like this. And so I walk into a room and people are like, oh, that butch over there, right? So I've never been able to wear a mask in that way. So I can't speak to that, but yeah.
I'll just say, I mean, code switching is real and that's what I do. So I'm not going to talk to my family the same way I'm going to talk to my friends. I'm not going to talk to my colleagues the same way I talk to my family, vice versa. I do work in the political field as well. So there is the concept of being politically correct, and that's what I have to be to conform to the dominant cultural norm, which is whiteness. I wish that I could tell younger Black and Brown generations that you can go into this workforce and you can be yourself in all aspects, and being yourself is beautiful, and that's what they teach us, but that's not realistically the way it is when you get to the workforce. I've had conversations from white people as well as Black and Brown people just trying to teach me the game. And I've talked about my wardrobe, save your fashion statements for when you're home with your friends, dress plain, cover your butt if you're wearing tight jeans, and that's just the way it is. So I hope that one day we can get to a point where people really do feel like they can be themselves, but I cannot be myself in every space. And you kind of have to navigate the playing field to survive.
Thank you all for those authentic answers. And Evan, thank you for the question. And it's 1:18, so we've got a little less than 10 minutes. Anybody else have questions, thoughts for the panelists?
Me again. I have a question. So with all of the racial trauma that we've been experiencing, what does Black healing look like for you guys?
Chloe, were you speaking or were you just off?
Oh no, I'll mute.
So I think that this is a complex question, Brittany, and everyone will probably have vastly different answers. For me, I don't expect healing to come anywhere outside of the Black community. Offers are nice, but it's not real, right? And so for me, Black healing in the face of all the things that we're going through collectively right now can't actually take place. And I say that because we are too divided as a Black community for us to heal collectively. And so what do I mean by that? So when George Floyd was murdered, he joined an unfortunately long list of Black male bodies that have been killed and murdered by law enforcement. We know that the way that the Black community responds to Black male bodies being murdered is different than how it responds to Black female bodies or Black queer bodies, right? That's one thing we have to work on together. we also have to work on like being able to talk to each other in a way that intergenerational healing can occur within the Black community. There's a huge standoff that's going on in our communities, right? Another issue that we have to be able to hold space for people who don't believe in a traditional religion, and people who do, and people who are in the middle. It's a huge issue when it comes to, like, even when we're organizing Black people, it's like we segregate ourselves even within the Black community. And to me, we can't reach a place of healing until we start to dive into those things. On a topical level, though, I think that being around other Black people, being around other Black and brown folks, and sharing joy, even if that's on social media, can be helpful. But in terms of collective healing, I struggle with believing that it can happen before we do the work we need to do.
And actually, my answer is really short, because I don't even think I'm at a place right now where I can even begin to heal. The wounds are still so fresh. You know, I have been telling my friends that I was gonna do things like not read like I normally do, or not watch the things that interest me on television, because they all have to do with like racism and history, and the history of racism in this country. And like, and the more and more I watch, the more I read, the more upset I become. And so I'm like, to be totally honest, I'm just not even at a place where I can even talk about healing right now.
And that's fair. I appreciate that. Chloe, no pressure.
I mean, my answer is pretty short, and I definitely agree with your perspectives, Brooke and Nikki, but I think we have to go through the truth and reconciliation process. Some people don't use the word reconciliation because we didn't start it, so we shouldn't have to restore it. Some people just say conciliation, but I think there has to be an acknowledgement of truth and the damage that has been done and the damage that is perpetuated first. And then, you know, as a state, a country, or even if you're talking about relations between people, reconciling the damage that's been caused and following reconciliation processes. There's an equity consultant that I've had the pleasure of working with. She has folks propose an agreement that all parties need to agree to, where the victim gets to propose their solutions and what they can part with and agree to. And then there has to be repair or reparations for the damage that has been done as well. And so I don't think we're going to get to any kind of healing until we go through that process and reckon.
Thank you all for those answers. Then can we start teaching accurate history first, then maybe I can get to a place of healing, says Nikki. Yes, I think what I took from all of the comments was kind of just like, we need to be in a place where honesty and transparency is happening, that's in the community and outside of the community. And then Chloe says coming to the table is a good resource. Thank you, Chloe. And the link is in the chat, coming to the table -rva.org. Any other last questions, thoughts? I do, just since we don't have another question or thought, want to summarize for those who weren't able to join or maybe came in halfway. Nikki, Brooke, Chloe, thank you, because I want to be transparent. This is not a paid gig, and I asked you all and was transparent about that, because as a nonprofit, we don't have an operating budget. Like our model is set up that like any money that we get just goes to back in the community. Probably not the best model, but that's neither here nor there right now. But I want to say for those organizations that do have money, please, and I loved what Chloe said about voices, like paying people for listening, paying people to give feedback. When that is available, even if it's in the form of $5, even if it's in the form of a gas card, that compensation matters. Something else that you all brought up, Nikki called it a kitchen cabinet. I have previously used a governing board for yourself. So like nonprofits have governing boards, but having that person that's finances, having that person that can talk to you about your mental health, having somebody that can talk to you about history, right? Like having each person have a different role. And the next step I would say to that is let people roll off your board. It's okay. Like everybody is not meant to go with every season, every goal, every process with you. So it is okay to have people serve certain terms. They might even shift. They might start out as the finance person, and they might become the self-help person, but make sure you have that army. And I think Brooke, Chloe and Nikki all spoke to this need to have a network of people around you. So I encourage you all to build your squad, gather your comrades, however you want to conceptualize it. Something else that came up was knowing yourself and knowing if this work is for you, and that everybody's role doesn't have to be the same. You might not be the marcher. You might be the check writer. You might also be the legislative advocate. You might be the person that is stuffing the envelopes. Each role matters. And I love what Brooke said when answering the question about masks, wearing a mask, of making sure, and this was said other times too, about knowing your worth, making sure that you understand that what you have to bring. And Chloe said, your experience is your expertise. So making sure you know that you are worthy, you are needed, and lean into that and connect with people who recognize that you bring something to the table, because my liberation is tied to your liberation and vice versa. So I just wanted to summarize those great gems from the panel. Did I miss any, you all, that you were like, this is a good nugget? All right, the last nugget is I'm gonna run off these links. So the collab spot, Brooke and a dope team of Black, queer individuals are creating space and business opportunities for folks in the Richmond community. So please visit thecollabspot.com. Then we also have Chloe Edwards, Black Lives Matter 804, blacklivesmatter804.org/donate. And then Nikki representing New Virginia Majority. Also, you can donate there too. So please make sure that you are tapping in. And last but not least, donate to Collective 365. Our goal is $35K for grant funding in the 2022 cycle. So please, donations as little as 10 or more, it all matters. So please make sure that you are supporting your organizers, and don't invest in the name, invest in the passion and the purpose, and the people doing the work. We get caught up in being like, oh, I want to only donate because I know this name, or they've been around for a long time. But let's break that and say that we want to invest in anti-racist organizations. We want to invest in individuals who are dismantling white supremacy. That should be our focus. So with that, I say thank you to the lovely panelists. Nikki, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say anything?
Yep. So I just want to say, definitely give to the collab spot, give to Black Lives Matter 804, and give to Collective 365. New Virginia Majority is a mainstream organization funded by millions of dollars. We don't need your donation. Donate to these other donate to these other organizations.
Thank you for that. And I want to say thank you again. Have a great rest of your day. Protect your peace, protect your joy, and rest. You don't need a reason to do it. The work will be there, the drama will be there, but you may not. So protect your peace and share this message with others. Love you all.